There's just so much.
You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.
Renee was pregnant for the first time when she decided to Google something very specific about her life. Anyone who's ever Googled something about a medical condition or during pregnancy knows that it can leave you feeling a little anxious, a little unsettled. But Renee really needed to know, should you have children if a blood relative is a murderer? The answer she got back referred to something called the murder gene. And instantly, Renee was transported right back to a phone call that she had when she was just 6 years old. From Mamamia, you're listening to No Filter, a podcast where people tell their stories very candidly and aren't afraid to be vulnerable. My name is Mia Friedman. Growing up, Renee McBryde thought she had an ordinary life. She was raised by a young single mum in Sydney. She spent time with her grandparents every weekend. And her dad wasn't around. In fact, she'd never met him, but they spoke on the phone every week. But it was during one of those phone calls on an ordinary Saturday night that Renee would suddenly realise that her family was not, in fact, ordinary. They had secrets that spanned generations. And by the time she became a teenager and learned the shocking details of these secrets, she became determined to break that cycle. Since then, Renee has had 4 kids of her own, she's written 2 books, and she works in child protection for the Northern Territory Government. Here is Renee's fascinating story. Renee, when you were growing up, where did you think your dad was? Because you'd never met him.
No, up until the age of 6, I thought he was working for Cotties Cordial and that he was kind of like the boss farmer or something like that, because I really loved that ad, the jingle, my dad picks the fruit that's made for Cotties.
That makes the cordial that I like best.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So I think I loved that ad so much that was the lie that was, she loves that, we'll say he's there so it doesn't upset her. She'll think that's really great.
And who was in on that lie?
My mum and my grandparents. Yeah.
So you thought he was picking the fruit.
Yeah.
Did you think it was weird that you'd never met him?
I probably should have thought that, but it was just sort of made like he works really far away and, you know, he's doing that important fruit picking work.
Very important.
Very important. I think that's why they told me that he works so far away, because I was like, why don't I have a dad around like everyone else, and where is he and why doesn't he want to see me? So they, you know, kind of told me that's where he was.
When was the first time you spoke to him on the phone and how did that come about?
For some strange reason, my grandmother, who was not his mother, who is my mother's mother, kind of liked him and had this sort of weird connection to him. And so she allowed or set up that I would speak to him once a week, because I would go to my grandparents' house every weekend. We would speak on Saturday nights before I watched Young Talent Time as a routine, but my mother didn't know that. I don't remember exactly when I first spoke to him, but I remember that being a routine at that time.
That would have been pretty exciting. You were, 6 or 7? How did you keep that from your mum? Did your grandmother say, don't tell mum?
Yes.
And why? What reason did she give for not telling mum?
She didn't want her to know, but she thought I should have a relationship with my dad, and my mum wouldn't allow it. And I didn't really understand why. I just thought, oh, she doesn't like him. That was why. So I didn't want to upset her and say that I was talking to him.
When did your mum find out that you were speaking to him?
Well, she had to know once he revealed that he wasn't really working at Cotties Cordial. No one knew he was going to reveal this information to me. We were just having a regular one of those Saturday night calls, and he said, I actually don't work for Cotties. I can't see you, not because I'm working at a farm, but because I'm in jail. And it just kind of imploded. So Mum then had to be called in an emergency, get over here, because…
Were you crying? Were you scared?
I was so upset that he didn't work for Cotties Cordial.
Yeah.
That was the main
That's the blow.
feeling. Yeah, I really was like, what do you mean, you know? And I didn't really have a concept of jail, I had said, well, why? Why are you in jail? Because obviously at 6, it's pretty, simple. Like if you're in jail, you're bad. And so I was like, why? Why are you there? And he kind of was like, oh, it's really complicated, but I killed somebody. And this was all happening just while I was on the phone, and my grandparents had no idea what he was saying to me. And then I just burst into tears about the Cotties thing. And then I just remember like my grandmother taking the phone away and being like, what have you said to her? She's crying.
Yeah.
And then there was some damage control when they had to call my mum.
She would have had some explaining to do, your grandmother, to your mum.
Yeah.
So do you remember that night? Do you remember your mum coming over and what happened then?
I remember her coming over and she was all dressed to go out night clubbing with her friends. And, yeah, it being like a big issue, that sitting around the dining table and them trying to figure out what to say. And I could ask some questions, but mainly they were just trying to work out what to do. I think like my grandfather was like, let's everybody pour a Scotch and Coke or something and explain to the child what's going on.
Did you have questions or you were just shocked?
I was just shocked, I think, and really didn't understand really like what jail was or what any of that meant, like just that I hadn't known the truth for my whole life.
It was a huge amount of information to take in. When was the next sort of phase of you learning, how did he kill a man? What happened? Like, did they make up another story to tell you?
I think they just kept adding to it. Whenever I had a question, they really made out. My nan was a big Chuck Norris fan at the time and loved those action movies, and they'd kind of made out like that he was around some bad people and was trying to do the right thing, and really was a bit more of a hero story, like, the bad guys were killed inadvertently in a muck-up sort of thing.
Well, he was being a hero or self-defense.
Sort of like that, yeah. But you can't tell anyone. And I think that would have been quite scary for them to think, oh my gosh, this 6-year-old girl has this big information, and how are we going to make her keep quiet, because nobody else knew. None of my mum's friends knew, or anybody else in our lives. And so they really tried to force that of like, you cannot tell anybody this at all. And that was kind of the main message. So I could ask my nan questions on the weekends, but it was pretty much a no-go topic, and certainly so with my mum. My mum really found it difficult to talk about. And then once I knew that secret, we became closer in a different way, because it was more like we were sisters and we had this secret together to hold. So that kind of really impacted our relationship and changed it, where we became far more entwined as co-conspirators probably than mother and daughter.
That's a lot of layers of secrets already, isn't it, when you were 6? Like you had to keep the secret from your mum that you were talking to your dad, then you had to keep the secret from everyone else that your dad was in prison. They told you that if people found out, they wouldn't want to be your friend.
Yes.
Do you remember feeling scared that this secret would leak?
Yeah, I did. I felt really, I think not so much that it would leak, but that I would slip up and have that pressure of what's the right lie to say. And I think as a child like on
Father's Day at school when everyone's, there's a stall. Oh, where's your dad?
Yes, yeah. And then I sort of thought, well, do I keep going with this Cotties cordial thing? I do remember saying different lies to different people sometimes, and then thinking, oh, I hope those people never cross over. Like I think I started saying, yeah, my dad died. And then, oh, this boyfriend of my mum's, he's my dad. Just trying different things and then realising probably they're going to catch up. I need to be consistent. What should I say?
What a lot of pressure for a little girl.
Yeah.
You said earlier that you'd spend every weekend with your grandparents and that the weekend that your father told you that he was in jail, your mum was getting ready to go out with her friends. She was not very old, was she? You were 6, so she would have been 21 or 22?
Yeah.
She was really young when she had you.
Yeah. She was 15 when she fell pregnant, just turned 16 when she had me.
How did she meet your dad?
Well, she had really rough relationship with my grandmother, and so she'd run away from home and thought, I just can't do this? And I think, my grandmother hadn't been able to give her that love because of her own traumas that she'd been carrying. In hindsight, that's obviously why. But for my mum, she just couldn't understand, like, why doesn't my mum love me? And they never could give each other what the other needed. And so my mum ran away and was living rough on the streets of King's Cross and kind of just begging for change at Central Station and things like that. And she met my father. She saw him playing video games in one of those old gaming parlours at King's Cross. They fell in love.
Was he also a street kid at the time?
Yeah, he was. He was living on the streets, a little bit older and more street savvy. And so I think she also felt a bit protected having somebody like him watch out for her.
Was he a lot older?
He was 18 or 19. Yeah.
So 3 months after they met in the video arcade, she fell pregnant. In the 3 months that they were together, what were their lives like?
The same sort of thing, begging for change, and he would go and do jobs for people, and he used to work at a dating type of thing where he would end up just sleeping with people for money or
so
just
he was
being
a sex
with people.
worker?
Yes, but also just like a boy that hung around other men and would do odd things or jobs or whatever they wanted him to do. Yeah.
What did you find out about the circumstances of the murder?
I'd cobbled together all of these little bits and pieces over the years from my mum and then my grandparents and things like that. And then I really just still wanted more concrete information. My mum would only talk about it when she was drinking a lot and couldn't do it sober. It was still really raw and painful for her. And so I guess I really wanted those answers. I tried to track him down in the prison when I was a teenager and just took a heap of, 20-cent pieces to the payphone and managed to get through all those security areas. And then I spoke to him, and then I went to visit him for a weekend and tried to ask him all these questions and be a bit like I was the journalist and I want to know this and this and this. But he had really closed that chapter and didn't want to talk about it, or he wanted to have this relationship with me in a different way but wouldn't go there. And so I, for a legal studies assignment, found out that you could go to the State Library and access all of the old newspapers. And so I thought, well, I'm going. And I, got ready in my school uniform one morning and went straight to the State Library instead of going to school and just sat there the whole day just poring over all of the newspapers and realising that actually it was front page news and a much bigger deal than any sort of Chuck Norris type of, hero situation that I'd been fed as a child.
What did you find out in the library that day?
I learned that it was actually 2 separate murders, whereas I'd always kind of believed it was just this break and enter gone wrong. Then I thought, well, that can't be possible for it to go wrong 2 times. And then I just was learning the details about his life. I didn't know that he had been a sex worker. I learnt that in the library, that it said, young prostitute arrested for sex crimes, and it was some important politicians and things that he was around at the time. And yeah, the front page of the newspaper was quite shocking to me because I was like, wow, this is a much bigger deal. And yeah, I guess I just could read in the articles the details of what was happening from when these people were first murdered and followed the case along up until the trial. And I read the judge's verdict being handed down that said that my father was a cold-blooded murderer. And I felt like, if there'd been a book to slam shut, I was slamming it shut and moving on. Then I was like, right, Mum's right. I have to keep this a secret. I can't tell anyone who my dad is.
If it's not too painful, can you tell me the circumstances of the murders? Who were his victims, and did it happen on the same night in the same place?
They were 2 separate nights. I feel like they were probably a week or so apart or some time apart. It wasn't on the same time frame where you could sort of say this was a crime of rage or something like that. So I sort of felt like I couldn't understand that this had happened once. Maybe it was a crime of passion or something like that, but not twice. And so far apart from each other. One was a school teacher and the other person was a Greek consulate, so quite high profile, and I think that's why possibly it had so much media. But
Both men.
both men, they had
So they'd been
employed him.
clients
Yeah.
of his.
Yeah.
And he'd murdered them.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you said you looked him up and found him, that wasn't the first time you'd met him, was it? You'd been taken to the prison when you were much younger.
Yeah, my grandmother, once I had known the secret, it seems very odd at the time, but she still was like, no, we're going to go forward with this relationship. And she took me to see him out at Long Bay Jail. You know, I was all dressed up in my Sunday best and she put the rags in my hair to curl it so I looked all
Like
wonderful.
Shirley Temple.
Yeah.
How old were you? Like 7 or 8?
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, it was like a big deal that we were getting ready.
Do you remember feeling scared going to a prison to see your dad, the murderer?
I just didn't know what a prison was, and I did
Yeah.
feel nervous. And we got the bus there and, you know, she had me wearing these like white gloves. Like I was quite dressed up and frilly white
Like for
socks.
church?
And yeah.
And he'd never seen you before.
He had seen me as a baby, but I didn't know that at the time. And I remember getting off the bus with her and just looking at this vast building, and then I felt scared because I was like, oh, I don't know what I thought I had in my head, but that wasn't it. And there was all the sort of barbed wire and things over the top of the walls, and it was quite intimidating.
What was it like when he saw you?
I remember feeling super uncomfortable because I just didn't know who he was. Like,
He was a
and
stranger to you.
everybody looked the same to me. They were all wearing the same like sort of prison overalls and greens, and I feel like everybody had tattoos. And so I was like, I don't know which one's my dad. And yeah, so that was kind of overwhelming. And then it was also quite a lot because he was very familiar with me and wanted to hug me and kiss me and things like that. And I felt really rigid and uncomfortable and just wanted to stick with my grandmother. And she was saying like, stop being rude, come out and give him a cuddle, get out from behind me. And I remember hiding behind her and holding onto her slacks that she'd worn for the day and being like, I don't want to come out.
Did you have to go back?
She did take me a number of other times, but to different jails. And then it kind of just stopped because my mother, I think, really was like, why are you doing this? Why
So
do you
your
keep
mum wasn't in
taking her?
contact with him?
No.
Had she been in contact with him since he was arrested?
Initially, they were still together after. I think she didn't know what to do. So she had taken me there as a baby.
Because she was pregnant when he was arrested,
Yeah.
pregnant with you.
Yeah. And so she did take me there.
She was 16.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So in the end, he cut off communication with you, didn't he?
Yes.
Why?
Yeah. I think he actually wanted to speak to my mother and really just wanted her to get on the phone and things like that. And then I thought it seemed like he didn't want that connection with me. He wanted to reconnect with her and she did not want that. And so we never spoke after that.
When you started to see him, was that an area of conflict for you and your mum? Or was she like, whatever you want to do?
As a child, it was pretty much that matriarch. My nan was saying what was happening on her time. Like when I was there, it was school holidays and it was more just like, when you're with me, I'll do what I want to do. And when you go back to your mother, that's her rules. And there was definitely a divide between them in that regard. So, yeah, the visits happened with my grandmother. I feel like they were still something I had to keep secret. I think Mum knew, but she didn't like it, and so we just never would speak about it if it was happening. When I tracked him down as a teenager, I had wanted to go. I was studying French and there was this opportunity to go and have an exchange. I said, please, can I go? You know, it was really difficult at home at the moment because she was starting a new family and in a new relationship and having another baby. And I just wanted to get out of there because I just didn't feel like I belonged. And I begged, please, can I go on exchange? She said, oh, we don't have the money. You should ask your father. He's never contributed anything to you and you call him up and ask him. Then I was like, right, all my 20-cent pieces and off to the phone box I went. And that's what prompted actually me to track him down, because I was so desperate to get out of there and go across to Paris and have an exchange program that's what propelled that. And
Did he help out?
God, no. He was like, no, but you can come and visit me. And
that's almost as good as Paris.
So close, yeah.
Did he have family that you were in contact with, grandparents on that side?
I know his mother, he was initially, I remember in one of those phone calls he'd told me that she had passed away. I was supposed to be really sad, but I'd never met her. I didn't act appropriately, but I was about that sort of 6 or 7 at the time. And so I don't think so. I know he had lots of siblings and things like that. Some of his side of that family reached out to me after I wrote The House of Lies, and that kind of opened that box where some of those people, wanted to talk to me about him. But I never had any relationships with him as a child.
Is he still in jail?
No.
When did
He's
he
out.
get out?
I remember the moment he got out because my mum was really stressed about it, because I was really close to, I think, being 16 when the media can mention your name or something like that. So that was a really fraught time in our house, because she was worried when he was out it was going to be on the news and they might mention us. Yeah, I remember actually it was on the news, and I was just slurping some cereal one morning and it came on the TV, and my mum and I both stood there, watched it. Nothing was mentioned about us. And then we didn't talk about it. I just put my bowl in the sink and went to school, and we never talked about it after that.
Oh, my God. And he never tried to contact you, either of you?
Not after that, no.
When he was released?
No.
Do you know what's happened to him now?
I did hear from him after writing The House of Lies, and I was, my mum was really worried about me, more than worried, did not want me to ever still tell that secret, even as an adult, still believe people will hate us and judge us and won't like you and you'll have a terrible life if you tell anyone. And so when I was writing The House of Lies, that was coming up a lot for us in our relationship. But then after I wrote it, he did reach out and wrote a message to me on my author page and said, I'm really proud of you for writing this book, and I'm glad that you went on to have a normal life and that you look happy. That was a huge relief for me, because my mum had said if I wrote that book, he would come and kill me. So I had this really huge sense of relief. Like, I didn't believe her when she said that. Like, I knew that was kind of a scare tactic, but there was still an element of like, whew, I'm glad that he has written this. Yeah, exactly.
If your first book, House of Lies, was very much about your dad, your new book, Unravelling Us, is more about your mum. How did her life turn out after giving birth to you at age 16 and having your father go to prison for murder and being on the streets? I mean, it's a tough start.
It's a tough start, yeah. And I think, she had never had that love from her mother. And so she was determined to have me, even though lots of people told her to have an abortion, or there was some heavy pressure for her to give me away and let, a couple raise me. And she pushed back on all of that, because she used to say, like, I just wanted to have that love, and I wanted to have you because I knew you would love me unconditionally and that we would have each other. And, she would always say, it's you and me against the world. And it was like that for a long time, and more so after I learned the secret, because then there was nothing between us. And I thought that was quite special when I was younger, and I knew that we had this different relationship to other mothers and daughters.
How is it different?
We were just enmeshed together, and we were more like sisters and co-conspirators, and everything was kind of talked about between, us and her feelings. And it was really my job when she was down and sad and crying to fix her, to make her feel better. I enjoyed having that role. It was like this prize to make my mother laugh. She had the best laugh, and if you made her get that laugh where she couldn't breathe, I was like, yeah, that's my job. Like, that's what I'm good at. And so it felt special, but it wasn't the norm. And then now that I'm a mother, I'm like, actually what I really needed was a mother then, not a sister or anything else. I needed mothering because I was a child.
How did she get her life back together after becoming a teenage mum on the street?
She was a hard worker. She really did want to make a different life, and she just learnt shorthand and became a secretary, and I remember her learning and studying for that. And then she was always a hard worker. She had a big drive to make things sort of better for herself, and she hadn't finished school, and she always, wanted to study more or learn more. She worked hard.
When you did become a mother yourself, how did you know how to do it?
I didn't. I was just reading all the books and, trying to basically put every bit of information that I could read. I was totally that person pregnant with, what to expect when you're expecting, all the different books and reading everything, because I was like, I don't know, I want to get this right.
Yeah.
And to a certain degree, I think, I'd always looked at other mothers. I knew what my mum and I had was not the norm. And so I looked at all those kind of perfect families and, families who seemed to have everything together and were more normal. I just stored away little tidbits of information about that and hoped that I would put it all together and be able to use all that information for when I was a mum. Yeah.
Were you worried about your father's genes? I mean, this wouldn't have occurred to me, but you said you wrote in your first book how you were worried that maybe the murderer gene was in you.
I think I was pregnant at the time, and I Googled something about that, and some silly person had written if you have a parent who's committed murder or any serious crime, you shouldn't have children. And I remember just being like, oh, shouldn't I? And I was worried, and I, thought, oh, maybe I won't be good even if I think I'm going to be okay or I'm dedicated. Maybe deep inside there's still something wrong with me. Yeah, those thoughts played in my mind.
There is no murderer gene though.
No,
is there?
no. And I know that. I'm a logical person, but I guess, it is that one little thing that sticks in your mind. You could have 100 nice things said to you, but that one comment sticks with you and you just think, oh, am I going to be good at this?
You've got 4 kids now.
Yeah.
Intergenerational trauma that you've had from your grandmother to your mother to you. And they say that trauma can be passed on down through our DNA, certainly descendants of Holocaust survivors. There's evidence of that. But so much of it is subconscious, isn't it? Have there been moments as a mother where, whether it's around secrets or certain things, how has it played out in your mothering?
I think I've gone so far the other way that I have to watch myself to do that. I'm just this all-encompassing up in their lives and trying to be this great mother to them that sometimes I actually do have to step back and be like, no, I still need to have my own life as well.
You are on the side of helicopter.
No, I'm not. I'm free range.
You're free range.
Yeah. I just want them to have all the experiences and do all the things. And, I love being out with them and just being with them and getting mucky. And probably that's just because I didn't have that typical experience as a child myself. So I love doing that stuff with them. I have always wanted to be open and honest with them. I don't want to put that burden on them to have to ever fix me. I want to show them that vulnerable side so they don't think oh, mum has it all together all the time. But at the same time, I never want it to be their job where they're like, we've got to make mum stop crying or we've got to pick her up off the bottom of the shower, because I know what that was like as a child to do. And I just want them to be kids, Have
you had a lot of therapy? I mean, you are a social worker.
Yeah, I have. Well, I do believe in counselling and talking through things, and I know all the answers though. So sometimes when I don't know all the answers,
because of your training,
yeah. So I know what I would say to someone if it was them saying it to me. So sometimes I can be a bit dismissive of that, but the writing process has always made me feel like I have to face up to things in a deeper way, you know. Yeah, definitely I've had some great counsellors who like push back on me and have said like things to me that have made me think differently, because I've thought, oh, that was my role, and, you know, I failed my mum and I didn't get it right and I've done this, and they'll just say something really simple like, but you were a child.
That's my favourite thing about
Like,
therapy. Like you've got a narrative that you tell yourself
Yeah.
to make sense of things that have happened in your life. And then this is why therapy is different from having a chat with a friend, isn't it?
Yeah.
That they will challenge you and they'll just go, but Renee, you were 7.
Yeah.
And in learning that and in sort of reframing it, did you go through a phase of feeling really angry with your mum?
Yeah, I've definitely felt angry with her. And I think when my mum had my younger sisters, I sort of felt like, well, I was the accident. I was a practice run. You've got to have it together now for my little sisters. And I feel like I got angry with her when I could see the same things happening with them. And that was probably when I really started to like challenge her on things and feel disappointed in her. I'd never felt that way as a child myself, because I was like, oh, we're in this together. But for my sisters, I would feel like, why haven't you should know this now. We learnt this together when I was growing up. And yeah, stepping into that mothering role with my sisters, I sometimes did feel angry at her because I had sort of felt like she'd had a practice run with me.
Was she open to that feedback?
She relied on me a lot for that sort of help, you know.
But when you said, hang on, you got to do better, and what about this?
No, interestingly, she would say, well, you're not a mother. And so when I became a mother.
She played the mother card.
Yeah, and I felt like when I became a mother, then it sort of cemented some of those things for me, because I was like, well, now I am, and I know that this is what I would do for them, and why can't you do this for my sisters? Often it would be for them that I was wondering, but then sometimes as I was getting older and having more children, I was then starting to think, why can't you be this for me? Why can't you do this for me? Because I feel that way for my kids. And so I guess I kind of started to think maybe it wasn't as normal as I'd always thought it was, and that we didn't always need to have this mutual exchange, that sometimes a parent can just do all those things for you, and that's what is lovely about that.
And you didn't owe them anything.
Yeah. I still don't know how to accept those types of relationships. Like, yeah, I still feel like it's hard for me when people are really lovely to me. I'm like, I have to be really lovely to you back. What can I do, you know, because it was always mutualised. And if not me mothering more and doing those lovely things, I wanted to do them for her. I didn't know it wasn't the norm.
What was she like as a grandmother?
She was excited. She loves the baby stage because it's a beautiful stage, and she would often say that to me and my sisters, like, I wish you would stay babies. That was so much better when you wouldn't have all these opinions and things about what I'm doing. She was very doting, but it definitely changed our relationship, because as soon as I became a mother, I couldn't give myself to her wholly all the time.
Wow, she still demanded that of you.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
expected that of you.
I think I was just always her person. And so when I couldn't be, that challenged our relationship.
Have you made peace with, or can you make peace with that kind of intergenerational trauma? Can you break a cycle?
I think so. I think change is really hard. And, you know, for my mum, I really wanted to like pull her there with me. But then I've sort of kind of come to the realisation that change has to be really intentional, like about what you want to change. And it can't be the same for someone. You can't just drag someone else along with you, even though I've really bloody tried. So, yeah, I think that intentionality of wanting to break a cycle is where it can happen. And when you know you're in one, my mum didn't have that luxury. She'd gone from this super traumatic event straight into mothering, and then probably had no headspace for that. And, you know, I think that that's the difference, is that I've had this time to, you know, think about oh, what does that mean for me? And is that normal? Or why am I acting like this? And why can't I accept a nice thing from someone? Why do I have to give it back, like handball it immediately instead of just enjoy it? Like, and have that ability to think about all those things is a luxury. It's a privilege, you know, that I can have that space where she didn't get that. And so I think that's been pretty like crucial in turning things over and analysing the past and wanting to be different from the previous generations.
You can find Renee's books, The House of Lies and Unravelling Us, by following the link in our show notes. If you believe in women's media, if you believe in a purpose-driven media company like Mamamia, whose core purpose is to make the world a better place for women and girls, please consider becoming a paid subscriber to Mamamia. A portion of our profits goes to educating girls in some of the most vulnerable communities in the world through our charity partners, and it only costs $5.75 a month, which is less than a large coffee or a small coffee if you get oat milk. Our producer is Gia Moylan, the executive producer is Eliza Ratliff, and I'm Leah Friedman.